Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 2 in our new series, which is Life Goes On. So we've done away with Anatomy of the Crisis and now we're thinking about life moving on. I hope you liked our new theme tune. We thought it was uplifting, which is in the spirit of this series. And also congratulations to anyone who received their GCSE results this morning, any families that are having emails coming through. Chaitali said that kind of 8-9 o'clock you should be getting some emails, so hopefully they're as you expect and you're celebrating in your households this morning. This series talks to business, HR and finance leaders who not only survived the crisis and lockdown, but actually thrived in some way. So they've continued with transformation and technology projects, and they're seeing really positive results and lessons that can be shared with our listeners. So I'm Becky Statham, I'm one of the principal consultants at Brand Performance, and I've spent the last kind of 20 weeks or so of lockdown gathering insights from lots of different sectors into how businesses have adapted during the pandemic, how our priorities, projects, programs have needed to change, and sharing those thoughts on webinars like this. We also do the Automation and AI series, reframing webinars, which talk about how our HR and finance service and processes and systems need to be framed differently for the future. And also our My HR Careers webinars, where we give tips and advice to aspiring and inspiring HR professionals who are looking to kind of maximize their impact as HR leaders. So for anyone who doesn't know Varan, we're a consultancy. We help businesses to solve their HR and finance problems and transform HR and finance from a people, process, data and technology perspective. So it makes a lot of sense that we do webinars like this, where we hear about businesses who have done that really well despite, quite challenging times. So I'm really excited today to be joined by 2 guests from the British Council. I've got Chaitali Hireker and I've got Janet Huckvale. So good morning and thanks for joining me, Janet and Chaitali.
Morning. Good morning, and thank you very much for having us as well, and very exciting to speak to you and the others. As Becky's introduced, I'm Chaitali Hireker. I am the Director of the HR Transformation Program at British Council.
And morning everybody. I'm the Programme Manager for Transforming HR and particularly focused on the technology and process change rather than the overall politics and making it all happen, which sits more with Chaitali.
Thank you. And Chaitali is actually supposed to be on annual leave today, so an extra warm welcome and thank you so much for taking time out to share your experience with us. So what we're going to do is I'm going to mainly stop speaking. I'm going to ask a few questions as we go through, but we're going to hear a bit about the British Council because when I was reading the notes, there are actually 12,000 people in over 100 countries. And so there was me thinking that the British Council meant that we were just in Britain. So I'd love to hear a bit more about the British Council and what you do, hear about the programme that you've continued despite lockdown and the pandemic, and then any lessons learnt that you've both taken and what we can share with people on the call today. So as usual, we've got the Q&A box. So if you've got any questions, comments, please ask them as we go through and then we can address them at the end. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Chaitali to tell us a little bit about British Council as an organisation. So over to you, Chaitali.
Thank you. So it's interesting you said that we were only in Britain. When I joined British Council, I was asked whether you know anything about British Council. And it's quite interesting. When you talk to somebody on the streets here, they would know what British Council is. It's actually more well known externally and internationally. So British Council, it's a charity. It is governed by the Royal Charter, and we are what is called a non-departmental public body. And we are sponsored by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, so sort of like an arm's length government body. And the Queen is our patron and Prince Charles is our vice patron. We are headquartered in London and we do operate in about 120 legal entities in over 100 countries. And as you said, we've got about 12,000 employees that are scattered everywhere. So we do have a big presence here in the UK, but all the way across the world in the remotest of places as well. And the organization is divided into 7 major regions. So we'll probably talk about those regions as we go through the conversation. As a government organization or an arm's length government organization, we do get funding from the government, which is about 15% of our revenue. Actually, the bulk of our income is generated through teaching activities and through running exams. So we teach English as a language, and we run exams across the world. And we are about 86 years old. We were formed in 1934, so we go back way back in time. Our purpose is very much around promoting cultural relationships between UK and the other countries, and we do promote the language of the English language, and our job is to build connections across UK and other countries as well through art, culture, education, and the language. We're also known as a soft power. So those are probably some not fun facts, but just facts about the organization. I don't know, Janet, do you want to add anything to that?
Not really, other than just to re-emphasize that, as well as being setting the context in terms of that structure, from my perspective, I was surprised by the level of impact that when we were going through the crisis, the level of impact that having to manage so many different geographies all at once and to deploy in multiple geographies all at once, we'll come on to that, but our structure size and the remoteness of some of the locations certainly added some interesting features, not just to the original project, but also more recently to trying to deploy new technology.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you. Good introduction. So, and actually, you know, being kind of over 80 years old, the British Council, interestingly, would have been through quite a lot of different crises and adapted in different ways. Whereas, you know, some of the businesses we've spoken to are quite new. So it might be the first time they've been through something like this as an organization. So tell me about the project that you've been continuing through the crisis then. So, you know, when did this kind of first come onto the agenda? You know, what were the drivers for that project? And, you know, I guess what were you aiming to do, and how has that materialized over the last few months?
So I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson on the project first. So the program started in its original state way back in 2017. And for various reasons, it was struggling to deliver the benefits. And I was brought in very early 2018 to review what was going on in the program, the roles, responsibilities, governance, and really to turn it around into something that was viable, and it was going to continue to be viable. Our original scope then was implementing the Employee Central module from SuccessFactors and the recruitment module, and set up a shared services. So by early 2019 we had started making substantial changes to our delivery program structure we needed, and also in the way of working and the governance of the program. And while doing all of that, we also realized that it was not just an HRIS implementation, it was actually a transformation. And that took quite a lot of our time. So our scope of the work, it just increased drastically from just being an HRIS systems implementation to becoming a transformation. And our vision then became that we would move all transactional activities, all high volume, low return of investment activities into shared services model that allows the HR colleagues to focus on value add activities and to create an efficient and a leaner organization. And all of that would be underpinned not by 2 modules, but actually 6 modules of SuccessFactors. So when I say our scope increased, it increased drastically. Wow. And then came in Janet as well, in terms of, none of us really know how each of those modules talk to each other. And, Janet's our guiding star for all of that. So with the help of this new technology that we were putting in place and putting global standard processes in place, we were moving more towards self-service. And that was basically what our approach was, that employee self-service, manager self-service. So transformation really was going to, the HR transformation, what it was now being called, was going to impact everyone, each and every person in the organization. So the 12,000 people globally, and it would absolutely change everyone's way of working across all the countries. I will go into our program timeline. I will pause there though. I will ask Janet, do you want to add anything to the history lesson?
Just to maybe add a little bit more about the fragmentation of the organisation that we were, historically, British Council hasn't been a global single organisation. Mm-hmm. So not only were we different in that we're not modern, a lot of organisations say yes, but everybody had developed their own way of working across their different countries and regions. One of the challenges here, as I understand it, is that British Council is much more of a sort of franchise type operation historically, and therefore the move away from that and into a standardized global structure with common systems hasn't just been a transformation as in somebody at the top said do it. We have so many different, not just legal entities but business units as well. We have business units for teaching, examinations, for cultural relations. They all have their own very unique ways of working, and we have the entity focus on top of that, the 123 legal entities, which does make the step change in for our business drivers and for our objectives, so entertaining to say the least.
Yes, very. So what were the timelines to try and bring, and I'm guessing, was it every country was in scope?
Yeah. So in terms of, so if we go back to March 2019, we went live with 7 pilot countries for Employee Central, so our first module that we were delivering. And that was 1 from each of the regions. So I mentioned earlier that we had 7 regions. So we took 1 country from each region, which was probably not the best decision. But we did that, and what that helped us do was that it helped us gain that confidence with the investment board and the senior leaders about our intention and our ability to actually implement. Because again, like I mentioned, it was not a program that was doing very well previously. And at that time, then based on the fact that we had gone live in 7 countries, then our HR transformation business case also got approved. So we then embarked on the journey that we are on now. Which and I say it, always say it, it's been a very, very aggressive timeline. And I know when I was talking to you previously, it was, you know, we don't agree with milestones moving. Absolutely, the milestone is fixed, and we did have a massive scope. So all through 2019, we were learning, we were adapting, we were looking at all our global processes as each of the countries and regions were going live. We kept looking at what our global processes were. We were, you know, fine tuning as we went along. The program team was getting restructured because the scope was very different as well. So we were reviewing and changing how we governed ourselves, what our implementation approach was going to be. So that kept evolving over time. And there was a whole load of churn that was also going on in the program, whilst at the same time that we had to deliver our milestones. So, you know, that the sentence about flying your plane and building it, we were probably also trying to figure out where we were going to land and build the airport along with it, not just build the plane. And then our first region went live in November 2019. So East Asia being one of our bigger regions and a very, very important region, we went live there with Employee Central in November last year. And one of the big things we did, which became very useful for us in December, was we migrated all our employee records into Employee Central. So into the module. So we got a database of all our global employee records on there in December. And our next milestone, which was bang in the middle of when the pandemic happened, was March, our next milestone, which was we were going live with the global recruitment module all over the world. It was one big bang. And Employee Central we were doing regionally. So we had 3 further regions to go live. And also as each of these regions were going live, what we were also doing was simultaneously, we were doing the shared service offering as well. So as a region got Employee Central, the shared service went live with it. And then March happened and COVID happened, and then we had to start replanning. Again, I will pause and I will ask Janet, do you want to talk about something on the ground in 2019?
I think it was just very fast, not because the scope approval, the change in remit, and actually having to go out, find our implementation partner, identify the gaps and the additional things that we were going to need to do and the additional partners we were going to work with in order to be able to deliver to such an aggressive timetable, and it was very aggressive. I started in August 2019, and to then find an implementation partner, identify the additional tools that we were going to need for the new scope, get those agreed, scoped, and then identify with some of my colleagues the engagement plan we were going to need to be able to roll those out, so that we could have all of the regions live with Employee Central, the main database, and build the platform then for the things we've been implementing since. So all the other modules that we have to complete by the end of this calendar year has been really, really aggressive for everybody.
And lots of people on the call might be considering choosing technology. They might be gearing up to do a program in the next kind of 12 to 24 months. You know, we quite often say that actually choosing the implementation partner is as important or even more important than choosing the technology. I don't know if that resonates, and how you went about choosing an implementation partner, because there are a lot of options for success factors. How did you do that? And were you trying to choose a global partner, or were they different in the regions?
Sorry, I was going to say, I'll let Janet answer that, and I'll come back into why having a right partner was important.
The right partner was actually, and I'm sure Chaitali will mention it, in retrospect, has been even more important than we thought it was at the beginning. I've managed 6 implementations, global end-to-end implementations of success factors, and the difference that you have in getting the right partner is absolutely critical. They need to understand, and for us, it was important. The timetable was aggressive, so we needed somebody who is going to work with us, understand the global pressures, understand our type of environment, and have a level of flexibility to work with us and really go out of their way to understand the challenges that we had. That was absolutely number one in our criteria. We shortlisted 3 parties who, any one of whom could have done the job for us and could have done it well. But the partners that we chose were actually, you know, the guys who we felt best fitted and were most agile, as we knew we would have challenges with our requirements. We knew we'd got hidden pockets of the business where they were doing things very differently and they hadn't declared right at the beginning. We knew they were there, but we needed somebody who'd be agile enough to support that, rather than saying, oh no, now we've got to start again and that'll be another £100,000, please.
Yeah. So how did you test that agility and that flexibility? Was it just, was it just meetings and was it, conversation and you got that feel, or was there a way to really examine that flexibility that you're looking for?
I think all of the partners that we talked to, we did have people around who knew them, who'd in one guise or another come across them before. A lot of it was the way that they responded to the tender, and then we did have meetings with them. I mean, we worked very, very fast. We had about a month from tender to, well, less than 6 weeks from the final tender to actually starting on the ground, and that was one big test of how flexible people were.
Yeah.
It was, and that's why I say that we were very aggressive. Our timelines have been very aggressive, so their responsiveness was very important. In terms of the implementation partner, we've been, again, historically, we've had different implementation partners. We did for Employee Central, we got a team internally. We actually did an augmented team model, so we delivered Employee Central ourselves with a partner who was based with us in an augmented way, and then we got implementation partner, this one that Jan is talking about, for recruitment onwards. And I think it's what Janet mentioned about going out of their way, and yes, being very agile, but it is very much around partnership. So the success is both parties being successful. Yeah. It's not one makes money off the other or anything like that. And that is very important. We've got to be sitting, I do use this phrase quite a lot when we're talking to partners. We have to sit on the same side of the table. And that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what happened then when March hit?
So we were, So early in the year, early in 2020, when I think things started getting impacted, East Asia started getting impacted, the business started getting impacted. I think that was around January, February time. And for us as a program, we were moving along very smoothly. We were hitting our milestones and everything was hunky-dory for us. And then suddenly, and actually in February, we had also reviewed our business case for viability. We had reviewed whether our return of investment was still on track and whether the transformation was still valid, like you do for all programs. And it was, and we had in February, we'd been given the green light to proceed towards our operating model. And then it became a little bit more evident that there was going to be a crisis, and situations started changing quite drastically in March. So what happened in the organization in March was that everyone was asked to halt non-critical activities, and we had to, because cash flow had become an issue, we had to start offering up savings. So almost every program in the organization came to a pause, and we were all asked to look at our investment asks. What we did look at, so with Janet's help, with my team lead's help, what we did do is we reviewed all our outgoings, we reviewed all our costs, and we did offer up almost a third of our budget. And that wasn't even sufficient. So we did have to keep going backwards and forth, going back to the investment board for 3 times at that time to review whatever the scope was, how were we going to deliver it, and keep going in front of investment board to offer up further savings. What we did realize in the program was that the challenge for us was very similar to what the rest of the organizations across the world were having and they were facing, which was a cash flow issue. So again, various scenarios were worked. What happens if we reduce our ask by stopping the program? What happens if we defer it? What does the scenario look like if we refocus on only a few critical modules? Like I mentioned, March was a big milestone for recruitment going live. We would have to deliver that. March was also 3 further regions going live for Employee Central. We would have to deliver that. What if we stop them? And we still had 3 more regions in Employee Central, so we can't really stop. So it was those sort of conversations we were having with investment board and trying to understand the different scenarios. Or should we look at all modules? Then, and it's all those sort of different scenarios we worked out, gave investment board a whole of numbers, figures, scenario planning. What we realized was we did have a very strong rationale for us to continue. It was not going to be, well, financially a good idea for us to stop, but also delivering a standard platform, a global platform for getting accurate employee information and services was not just something that was viable for us, it was actually becoming crucial at this point. And it was very important for us to know where our people were to help us make those decisions that we needed to make for planning and for governance during the crisis that we were going through. And that value had been demonstrated. I mentioned right in the beginning that we had taken in December, we'd moved all our employee data onto MyHR. And so the fact that we had a global database, it provided us with accurate, quick information for all our people. That had already been demonstrated as soon as the COVID crisis happened. And so for that initial management, where we needed to find people information very quickly, our system gave that information. So we didn't really have to convince people and investment board about the fact that there's a rationale for us to continue. What we did need to convince was how can we manage with a very, very small budget. And also from an implementation perspective, we were at that point where a lot of our investment had already been made. Our financial commitments had already been put in place. So we were at that point, we were at that tipping point of delivering our value to the organization. So what we did believe that we did need to just deliver the technology and just one little more step and we'd be there. Pausing or deferring the program would have a negative impact on the fund because, again, like I said, substantial investment had been made already. And also we had contractual obligations with regards to licenses, with regards to implementation, partner costs. So I think, so all of that made our business case to proceed very strong. And we did get approval. The way that we managed to make the bigger savings that we wanted. So we are working with, first I said we had offered up a third of our budget. We are actually working with a third of our budget now. So we have made a very, very big saving. And how we managed to do that was by deferring the implementation of the operating model. And
Okay.
so we were going to deliver the technology, but we were also moving towards a new operating model. So we deferred that implementation of the operating model change in the organization. And so what that meant was we removed a lot of the change effort that would be needed. And also we realized that, some sort of some modules also, we then said, okay, one module we said we will defer. And as cash flow was going to be such an issue, we started to negotiate deferred payments with our suppliers and with our partners who we were dealing with. And of course, we cut down the team massively. So there was an impact on the people side of it. And Janet can probably go into a little bit more in detail about how that worked out.
Yeah, I think it was a good job, and our partners were very flexible in rescheduling what we were going to do, in bearing with us whilst we did some navel gazing to get the picture right. But I think the most important thing that we had to do was to make sure we engaged the people who remained in the project. So we had to do things like, before hypercare, on just the week after go live in March, we had to start letting people on fixed term contracts and things go. So the resource dropped dramatically right at the beginning of the final phases of the program, the final phases of the ones we were implementing, and before we'd started some of the new ones. We had to put in a very flat structure, and we had to support the teams dealing with that uncertainty. So in the initial couple of months, through until April, May, June, we were dealing with a very high level of uncertainty amongst our team, a very flat structure, and we had to recalibrate the expectations within the team. And the team that we had to really help them to manage their environment and manage the expectations around them, because the impact from the business was very much, you're going to deliver, so you can still carry on doing what you were going to do anyway. But with a very, very drastically reduced number of people in the project team, actually recalibrating expectations, managing the environment was a big challenge. And not all of the team members who stayed, because we kept the very hands-on people, they weren't used to doing that. It was the project managers and the cover and the change people that we took out. So the pressure came directly on the people doing the deliverables. And all of us had to both...
How was morale? And were people stressed by that? Do you think that people were glad to be the ones that were still there? Because this applies to any business where they've had to furlough people as well, right? Where you get people who are working who are either really happy that they're not on furlough, but they're probably working more than ever and longer hours, and you've got people that are on furlough who are dying to come back, and it's really tricky to manage that.
I think morale, it was more nervousness than morale to start with. And what we found very quickly was that we had an incredibly achievement-oriented group of people, and they were willing to step up on the delivery and the delivery timescales, and to step down and do a lot more themselves, provided they felt in a safe environment to do it. And that was the challenge for Chaitali, myself, and other people around, to actually try and step down to doing ourselves, as opposed to just managing and reviewing and whatever, to actually flatten that team out genuinely and provide good cover from one to the other, so nobody felt too exposed. And given the nature and the deliverable, the achievement orientation of the people who remained, we had some big surprises. I mean, in my note in front of me for lessons learned, and I'll say it now, is just people were really, truly amazing. A number of the people we kept for contractual reasons, not because they were our highest performers, but because contractually we had to. And that meant we had to sacrifice some very high performers, because contractually we had to keep other people. And some of them were in the wrong part of the world. Some of them were in the wrong jobs. But every single one of them has really moved into that void And even people, and we found that people, the silos, inevitably you try not to have silos, but they exist. We don't have the luxury of silos anymore. And what I found is in the delivery teams is that actually people have really, risen, and the performance levels have risen now that we've engaged people who were basically relaying messages and being an interface, who now are in the design meeting, they're in the delivery meeting, and they're sitting down hands-on solving problems, not relaying messages. They've really stepped up. So I think although the size of the team reduced dramatically, the performance of the people who remained once they've got over the initial shock has been phenomenal. And
that's
from people
amazing.
I've expected.
I will add one thing though. There definitely is a bit of, some people are on furlough and some people have stayed behind, and there you do get a little bit of the survivor syndrome as well. So well-being becomes a very important part of actually managing the people. And as Janet said, that people, they filled the gaps that were left vacant. And you didn't say that, Janet, but I know that Janet's probably done 4 people's jobs, or sometimes 5 people's jobs. And there are other people who've done similar things that, they are covering 3-4 people's roles.
They've given up sleeping.
Yes, everyone's given up sleeping. And so, yeah, we do have the situation where the well-being of people is very, very important. And again, you just said it's part of one of my lessons learned, and I'll say it again, I'll say it here, which is that any crisis, any situation like this, it takes a toll on all of us. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting mentally, it's exhausting physically, emotionally. Also, as a leader, you want to keep your people happy. So we do have to take care of our physical, emotional, and our well-being needs. But one of the things that I figured was I have to also model that behavior to see. And I don't want them to follow. So, for example, I take a regular temperature check. I will, have a general chit chat with people, say hi to families. If there's a dog barking, I'll say, oh, let me say hello to the doggy as well. So, those sort of things are very important. And switching on videos, just actually seeing people, because we're not meeting people. We've been in lockdown for a very long period of time. So all of that plays a really important, the human aspect plays a very important part, and has played a very important part.
Definitely. And one of the other things that I picked up on in terms of lessons learned, this is quite a technical one, was you said that, having a pilot with one country per region was potentially not a good idea. Why was that, and what would you recommend instead, or what would you do if you were doing it again?
I think, so that was before Janet joined, and that the reason that I said that it was probably not a very good idea was because every region has a very different requirement. And there's, so when we were trying to deliver in 7 countries from 7 different regions, we had to give emphasis to each of their legal requirements. Whereas if we picked up one region, it might have been slightly easier for us to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That is something that we made a decision which has worked out for us, but we overcomplicated our life at that point.
And when you were very quickly contracting with your implementation partner, you would have been putting together your statement of work, your list of configuration items, etc. Was there anything that later down the line you had to change? Any kind of warnings for people on the call? The kinds of things that we see are underestimating the number of absence plans or benefits plans or work schedules, integrations, things like that. Was there anything that came up later that you'd underestimated in that rapid contracting time that you had to change?
I think because it was so rapid, we were a little bit more careful than perhaps you would have been if you'd had time to go through it line by line. So in principle, because we had to have a level playing field for the bidders as well, for the tenders. So we asked everybody to bid on to tender on the same basis, which was, one version. So where you might want 2 goal sheets, 2 types of goal sheets for performance, or you might want in onboarding, you might want 3 onboarding programs, and in recruitment, you might want 3 or 4 different requisition templates. we actually asked everybody to bid on just one. So we took a level playing field, we went out and we said, right, this is the baseline. We know we have to have more than this, but we want you to bid on this, and we want you to then tell us how you'll cost any variation to the SOW. And we didn't sign an SOW at the outset. We assigned an in principle, and then we agreed that for each module, we would revisit the SOW at the first kickoff and the first review when we went into our iteration 1 workshop, and we budgeted for increasing the content of the SOWs. So we budgeted on what we thought we were going to need. We contracted on the basis, and we had an agreement in the contract for the SOW to be confirmed at each workshop, knowing that we were going to want more than just one version of each, given our complexity. And it's worked pretty well. To be fair, it has worked pretty well. It's worked better than environments where we've either shied away from it and gone for time and materials, and it's worked better than environments where we've tried to dot every I and cross every T up front, and you never get it. You never get there, so you end up with maybe conflicts and things, but it worked well for us doing it that way.
Yeah, good approach. And you know, we've got one of our SAP colleagues on the line as well, so I'm going to ask this question for his benefit, because he'll like it. And I want to know, you know, what's the most valuable part of success factors that you've gone live with, do you think? You know, which part, functionality, report, process, you know, which part do you think has added the most value so far to British Council?
I think probably the best person to explain that will be Chaitali, because it is because of the timing. Yeah? It's the piece that said, we need to know where our people are, who needs to come home, what we need to do with them. So all the other things are nice, and we can prove a value in those. We may not have proven the value in the database, but Chaitali, I think, you know, when we hit the crisis, it actually reinforced the value, didn't it?
Yeah, so the value of having that global database for people, it did provide us with, you know, very quick information, accurate information, and it was about where people were as well. So we do have people who are, you know, expats from the organization who are located in different countries. So that has been the most valuable thing. And maybe that's the reason that we could carry on, because of the fact that the system proved during the initial COVID crisis management stages that we had that information, and it was because of the fact that we had this system. So Employee Central, definitely. And Janice just touched on it about, you know, how people, whether there were some people somewhere else who had to come back. So we do have those, that's also one of our tasks, to bring people back home. So that did, you know, the MyHR, the system was used for that. That's been the most valuable piece.
And once people, now I think people have got their heads around that. Now we're into managing in the new environment where we've got greater controls, greater governance on things because of the cost constraints. There's a fairly significant appreciation across the business of the recruiting module, because for the first time they can actually see what's being approved, which contracts are being extended, what's being advertised. They can see it by job type. They can see it by all the various you know, types of employment across the world. So our business units who work on a global basis across entities have much greater control of what's going on in their business than they did previously. And that now is being very well appreciated.
Yeah. And also going forward, what this database is helping us do is it's also going to help us support. Now we are in recovery, so it is going to help us support making decisions. It's going to help plan what does the workforce look like of the future, and onwards into the recovery period as well. That's where all of this is very important.
So moving and thinking about the future then, you know, what's next? Are there subsequent phases? You know, what does that recovery phase look like, and how does this project support that?
So for the organization, our priority is now that is business recovery and is to rebuild. program perspective, we are halfway there with the technology. We mentioned that we have Employee Central now globally, and we do have recruitment globally. And the priority for us as a program is to make sure that the system implementation is completed. So we still have onboarding to do. We still have employee files, open text. We've got learning, performance, and I'm sure I've forgotten one. Janet will probably talk about
digital
that.
contracts, that's all.
Digital contracts. So we've still got all of that to implement, and again, on a very, very tight timeline. So our priorities make sure that the system implementation happens. We want to make sure that the embedding of the new processes happens in the organization, the tools are used, and to embed the culture of self-service as well around the people tasks in the organization, because what we are doing in this program is changing that way of working.
That might be easier now that we're at home and we're remote, do you think? Because you can't just go over to HR or go over to your manager. You can't, you can't go to the payroll manager and ask them to put that change through. So do you think that that transition might be easier with people being at home?
Because we're a global organization, we were always still pinging each other. Yeah. So rather than walking to the person. But yes, I hope that it is easier, and I do hope that we can make that happen. But somewhere, I think the way of working with self-service is very much around people tasks. It's not my job, it's an HR person's job. That's the mindset change we need to bring about. So yes, the program remains a key priority for the organization and for HR. But one of the other things that we talked about right in the beginning is about the operating model. And further down the line in the new financial year, if we can afford it, then we will start to realign our HR operating model as well. And budget permitting, we will hopefully deliver the one module that we've left out, which is succession. We did have that in our plans initially. And also to make sure my focus and my team's focus, Janet's focusing on all the tech, but two of us are focusing on making sure that the HR services are delivered efficiently and effectively. So through the shared services and the global HR operations that we've got going on. So
well, that tees us up really nicely for another session, I think, in the future, right? We'll have to come back in a few months and see how everything's gone. I told you the time would fly by. We're nearly 11:15, so I'm going to let you both go. Thank you so much for sharing that insight with us. I think it's really useful and really positive and uplifting, to hear that even a business which is across more than 100 countries, people needing to come home, really reducing the team drastically, you've still managed to, to meet those aggressive timelines. So that's really encouraging. This Life Goes On series, it runs every other Thursday. So the next one is on the 3rd of September. And I'll be talking to Beverly Sorsby, who is the HR director at a global law firm called Ropes and Gray. She'll be talking to us about how they launched a new recruitment website during the pandemic. So there were various challenges there, but it's been a good success. And I do suggest, Chaitali and Janet, that we meet up again in a few months' time. Might even be in person, when we've got through the next phase, and see how you've got on. So, really appreciate your help today. Thank you both. Congratulations to the children, Chaitali, on the GCSE results.
Thank you.
And have a really good rest of the day, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks very much.